You're listening to Mothers in Arms. I'm your host, Leslie Lopez. This is episode Paving the Ethical Way in ART. Kaitlin Pinkerton Locker is the CEO of A Perfect Match and the founder of Coast to Coast Sperm Donation. These agencies were started by her mother, Darlene Pinkerton, who was inspired by her personal journey with infertility. Kaitlin is the third person in the world to be born via surrogacy. I recorded this episode in 2 days because there was just so much to cover with both agencies and it's one family, so I wanted to honor them with one episode. If you're watching us on YouTube, you'll see what I'm talking about, and if you're listening, please let me know if you even notice. Please follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. There you can watch or listen to the shorts if you don't have much time and you want to get the highlights. On TikTok and Instagram, I get into a little more personal and into physical movement that helps me cope with my different types of grief and anxieties. Follow us there for more. Without further ado, let's get into this. Kaitlin, you are both the CEO of A Perfect Match and the founder of Coast to Coast Sperm Donation. It's the most unique story, the most unique job. I can't imagine what your everyday looks like. It's very cool to be tapped into every aspect of assisted reproductive technology with both of these agencies, your family business. It's really very special. You grew up around assisted reproductive technology your entire life because of your parents being these groundbreaking, ahead of their time individuals. Your mother, Darlene, I cannot wait to talk to her one day. She, in the 90s, saw a need to improve her personal experience. What she went through, she saw how she could really take this to the next level. You are the third person in the world to be born through gestational surrogacy, which to me just speaks to my heart so much, as my daughter was also born via gestational carrier. And I thank the blessings every day for this movement in ART.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited for this chat.
Yes, my dad was originally a litigating attorney here in San Diego. When I was born, they wanted to put my gestational carrier on the birth certificate, which is actually his sister. So he was extremely uncomfortable with that for various reasons. You know, she's not my mother. She has no parental rights, but also that incest aspect to it of having two related siblings as parents on a birth certificate was not cool. Right. So he was able to argue in front of the court with a judge that by putting my gestational carrier on the birth certificate, they were actually setting themselves up for incest. And actually, that was illegal in California and jail time simply because of this birth certificate. And so they were able to get my mom on the birth certificate back in 1990. That was the first time, definitely here in San Diego. I'm not sure completely about all of California, but I'm pretty sure it was the first time in California as well. Once the physicians who were participated in my creation and their colleagues learned about what my father was able to accomplish, they started referring their clients, their patients, to my father as well to get the same thing done for children born via gestational carriers. It became so much that he had to stop his litigation practice and create a new practice specifically for ART. And he's now retired, but he is participating behind the scenes with both A Perfect Match and Coast to Coast Donation. Also, he was the first person to get 2 men on a birth certificate here in California as well. So he really did set up a lot of the case law in California for surrogacy regarding parental establishment.
That's very cool, Kaitlin, to be able to tell this
Yeah,
story.
my parents are definitely very cool people.
I want to get into carrier journey.
Yeah, so my parents have always been very transparent about my creation from the earliest days. A distinct first memory of ever being told about my creation. They used correct terms. They said they used my dad's sperm and my mom's egg and put them together in a laboratory, in a petri dish, and then took that embryo that was created and transferred it into the uterus of my gestational carrier. A lot of those words I think maybe didn't necessarily click what they were, but it was the correct term. And for like a more age appropriate explanation of the actual process, there was one time when I was probably about 3 where I asked, why did my gestational carrier give me up? Did she not want me? And this is my aunt. So this is somebody that I'm very close with. I see her all the time around holidays, right? And the way that my parents explained it to me and the way that my aunt also talked to me about it was, my parents had all of the ingredients to make a cake. They just weren't able to bake it in their oven because that oven was broken. So it's the same thing. I am still theirs. They have always been the intended parents for me. And my aunt was just helping them out with something that had broken in their house.
I love that. Yes, that's such a great way to put it for toddlers.
Yeah. When I was in kindergarten, for example, I stood up and I explained to the entire class about the sperm, the eggs, the embryo, the surrogate, all of that. My mom got a call from the teacher. I was like, your daughter had a really interesting story to tell today. And I just wanted to check in on this because, she was using these words and they're not normal words for a kindergartner. But my mom said I explained it perfectly to the entire class.
I love this age. My daughter's in kindergarten, and she explained to her class recently. I'd pick up, her teacher let me know, she pulled me aside and let me know that Elise told the class that she doesn't have to have a child. She's going to think about it. And also, not all tummies work. Her mommy's tummy didn't work. And so we borrowed somebody else's tummy. It's fun. Your parents' point of using the right terms early on.
Yeah, well, and it also helps it become very normal to somebody who's born through any type of assisted reproductive technology, right? This is your story. This is who you are. And I feel the younger you explain that to them, the better for the child and their mental health. That's my own personal experience, though, so I can't speak for everybody, but it's always been who I am and part of me, and it's never been a question or concern in my mind about my creation.
It's beautiful. Does your daughter ever hear you being asked, or maybe hear her grandparents being asked about?
She hasn't really paid attention. She does know that I help people who can't have babies on their own, and I help them find those different pieces that are missing and help them form a family.
How much of those first core values when creating a perfect match and when creating Coast to Coast are still in play in your family business?
They are 100% still in play. Transparency has always been a key part of a perfect match. Our very first advertisement, the family wanted to know who their donor was. At the time, there were really no egg donor databases that parents could look at. Your nurse just said, okay, here's a baby picture. This is who's going to be your egg donor. You didn't really get a ton of information. It's very similar to how a lot of the sperm banks still are, in that you got minimal information at the time. My mom obviously had a very transparent relationship with her surrogate. And when asked if she could help them find a donor through my dad's law firm at the time, she said, absolutely, you deserve exactly what you want. They were very tall, very educated people, Ivy League schools, all of that. And so they just wanted to find an egg donor who matched their family in both looks and ambition, education. It was all incredibly important to them, and they were not getting enough information from other egg donor. I don't even know if they were agencies at the time or if it was just through clinics. I was far too young. I was 8, so I don't remember any of it. So that transparency aspect, adult photos, there weren't really video recordings at the time, but there were certainly in-person meetings that were facilitated between the donor and the parents before the egg retrieval took place. You want to know this person before committing to that process rather than going through a retrieval and then meeting them, maybe. So yeah, the transparency and openness has always been key. Also, we believe that donors should be able to set their own compensations, especially egg donors. So we still to this day do not set our egg donors' compensations in any way. We may, if they're requesting something exceptionally high, we may say, I don't know that you're going to be able to get matched at this rate. Let's give it a try for a couple weeks, couple months, however long you want to stay at this rate, that's okay. But maybe we should explore reducing this if you don't get matched. We also allow intended parents to be a part of that compensation as well. So if a donor is requesting something higher than average, and the parents love this donor, connect with this donor in so many ways, but they just can't afford that compensation, we're very happy to present offers to the donors, right? So it's a conversation, it's a negotiation. It's not with our agency, you can't get more than $15,000, $20,000. We want it to be open and allow everybody to make that decision themselves.
That's wonderful. To give the intended parent in to feel like you're part of this process too. It's not just, with lack of better words, purchasing. It's really more, hey, we can work together, because I did find it challenging when looking for ovum donors. And I was like, how is it that this highly qualified individual could be asking for anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000, and then just with a different agency that's maybe with the zip code was more Beverly Hills, or maybe it was just a higher, I was looking at like $175,000, and it's hard to be on this side and feel like it's not an IQ contest or a beauty contest. Like, I heard at one point the egg donors did they take it to court? Was there a point where they said we're able to charge whatever we want to?
Yes, yeah. There's this organization, ASRM, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, and they have guidelines for reproductive medicine, including gamete donors and surrogates. And one part of that was that gamete donors should not receive a compensation over X dollar amount. But regardless, there was a cap on compensation, and any donor who received more than that was essentially not eligible to donate. So a perfect match was actually blacklisted by ASRM for a long period of time. And if physicians chose to work with a perfect match egg donors, they could have lost their standing with ASRM. It was a risk. A lot of people stopped working with a perfect match donors for that reason. But other clinics, especially those in California, where, cost is very different than, say, Florida, still worked with us anyway, because they had clients that wanted those donors, and they determined that it was none of their business how much an egg donor was being paid. She's still undergoing a psychological evaluation to make sure that her heart is in the right place, and that she is not doing this because she needs that money, and so she's being coerced by money. These are brilliant women who have degrees. They're doctors, attorneys, even just business owners. Maybe they dropped out of college or never even went, but they're women who are going into this fully knowing what they're committing to, and they're not doing it purely for financial reasons. That's a big part of what we do in our screening process, is talk to these donors. We talk to every single donor who applies. Anyways, kind of a roundabout there, but there was a donor, and she was one of our donors, who sued ASRM for price fixing. And a perfect match provided evidence of what our donors earned during time periods, and she won that case. And now it's just a recommendation regarding compensation. It is not a requirement.
I see. I think sometimes it can be really driven by financial if you're not with the right person. And maybe for some people that's fine, right? But for me, I did need a little bit more hand holding, right? Like a little more connection face to face, rather than just sort of looking at, check that box. Yes, you can take that.
Yeah, well, and regarding compensation too, these women are all at different stages of life, but there's also different goals or different histories that these women have. So with our first ad that we ran in 1998, it was publicized that it was a $50,000 compensation for this donor, which was a lot of money at the time in 1998. The family that we were advertising for, they just felt that this woman was going to be affecting their lives in such a massive way, and they had the financial means to help her pay off college debt. How could they look at their child and say, oh yeah, I paid this just to take some of the universities that we advertised at? Stanford graduate student and paid her $5,000 for this life-changing thing that she did for us, right? Like $50,000 was possibly 2 years of her degree at the time. So
Right.
that's kind of where our openness on compensation came in, and our feeling that donors do deserve to get paid what they feel is appropriate for them. It could be that they have college debt. It could be that they have personal goals to meet. We've had donors put the money toward a down payment on a house or help their family with this money. So it's such a unique thing and a different way of looking at somebody's value. It's not necessarily their value per se, it's an open conversation with our agency of this is what I want to receive for this, but then we always present whatever the parent is comfortable with as well.
Yes. I think I like the way A Perfect Match presents it. As an intended parent, when you hear sort of premium level donors, when you start hearing vocabulary like that, it gives me the ick, right? Like it's
Right.
their donors. Every donor is incredible. Every human
Mhm.
is great, right? Like it shouldn't be like, well, these are these and those are those. For me, it's like, this is your business. Then everybody who you've reached out to is amazing.
Mhm.
Otherwise, then why have it there? It's not about volume.
Well, and with our agency, when we have donors who are exceptionally high compensations, we don't put them on our database, right? We don't want a parent who's looking for more an average compensation to see this donor and have their heart broken to discover that she is 10 times the going rate for an egg donor. So we have that conversation with the donor and we say, if that's what you want your request to be, that is fine. But we're going to just hand present you to people that we know that you're within their budget. And so it may be that you're not presented at all if you don't fit the characteristics, if there's physical characteristics involved in that intended parent's decision. It may be that you're never presented to a family.
Do ovum donors have to have legal counsel as well going into contracts?
Yes, I'm not sure about egg freezing because we don't participate in that at this point in time, but for fresh donor cycles for a particular family, yes, they have a legal contract with those intended parents for that donation and they have their own independent legal counsel. We set a budget for that so that they're not choosing an attorney who's, extremely expensive, and most attorneys are very reasonable in their reviewing attorney rates. But we also have a list of people where we have negotiated a specific rate that's within the budget as well. The donors are very welcome to choose their own donor outside of our recommendations. We would never force a specific attorney on somebody, but their attorney needs to meet certain criteria, right? You don't want a litigating attorney with no experience to represent you in this
Right.
contract. So, we do have minimum requirements for who can, number one, write the legal contract. So the intended parents can't just pick any old attorney that has no experience in ovum donation. And the reviewing attorney also needs to have some level of experience in this. It's really important that everybody have independent representation, so there's no conflict of interest, and there absolutely needs to be that representation regardless, because this is a very big decision and there are a lot of nuances in these contracts that donors and intended parents, everybody needs to have somebody representing them. We don't even really feel comfortable with attorneys representing themselves in contracts. We've had intended parents ask that before. You can review it by yourself, but you're not going to be writing the contract. So then the donor would have an attorney who has the experience and can draft the contract. And then if the intended parents really do want to represent themselves, it's at their own risk kind of thing. We've advised them heavily not to, because unless you're active in this field, you're going to miss something or misunderstand.
That's right. What about for switching to coast? What about
Mhm.
the sperm donors? They also need legal representation when donating a fresh cycle?
Yeah, so we do the fresh cycle and then we also do banking. And because of our long history and our start under legal office, we feel very strongly that everybody should have legal representation regardless. So directed donation, absolutely 100% every single time has legal representation for the intended parent and the sperm donor. And again, it is separate representation, not even within the same office. And then even for our banking, we have the donors review our banking contract with an attorney so that they, again, fully understand the gravity and the commitment that they need to make during this process, because there's a lot of things in our contracts that are not typical for sperm banks as well. So we have family unit limits. So he can't donate to anybody outside of our agency without first telling us, or first we allow our donors to reserve family units themselves. So we've had donors who have donated to a family friend. So we would consider that one family unit. There's just a lot of things in these contracts that, yeah, even I don't think there's a single sperm bank out there that has legal representation for their sperm donors. There could be, but we absolutely do.
It seems like some donors, when they hear, oh, we need legal, it can be like, no, but that's a lot of money. But in reality, it is percentage, right? It is not weigh it all out. It is a small percentage that saves you so much heart, headache and heartache.
Well, and it's been interesting too with starting an ovum donation, and it's very standard practice in ovum donation. You have that attorney representing you. With the sperm donors, especially the sperm banking, the first donor that we banked, he was like, oh no, I reviewed the contract. You don't need to spend the money on an attorney. I'm good. Like, no, we're paying for this and you're going to do this because we want to make sure that you understand the contract and that your attorney is also saying that they've had the conversation and understand with you. So men are very different. They don't necessarily fight it, but it's like, well, but I read it. It's fine. I don't need somebody to tell me what this says. But we definitely always require it.
Part of what makes Coast to Coast so different from other sperm banks is you have this limit of 6 families worldwide. Other sperm banks don't have this. It varies from states to state, but can you explain how your donors are up to a week at a time per family and what that means?
Yeah, so we're definitely different in our family limit. And a lot of that comes from our history as an egg donation agency. So ASRM has a recommended limit of 6 retrievals for families. There can be some exceptions if there's sibling cycle, for example, 2 donations for the same family, all of that. But generally, it is considered that 6 to 9 is as many egg retrievals as an egg donor should do for another family. So we took that number and decided to set the same limit on men, because why should the male gamete have any kind of different limit than the woman? And then also at the time that we were really starting Coast to Coast, there was a lot of news about the sperm kings or donor conceived people finding out that there were hundreds of children from their donation. A lot of our parents at the time wanted exclusive donors because there were these flashy news titles coming out about, hundreds of donors, or finding out that their best friend used the same donor, So
Gosh.
it's really been client led as well here. We really firmly believe in a lot of what Colorado has passed in their state regarding gamete donation. Coast to Coast donation is fully licensed with the state of Colorado. There's a lot in their legislation that is about the donor conceived person having access to their information, to access to information from their sperm donor or egg donor. And so that, again, aligns with us very well. But they also allow, if it's a donor who donates in Colorado or is from Colorado, they are able to withhold family units from a bank or from other agencies. And that was something that we were already doing, but to have it be something where the donor now has a choice in how many families he donates to. You don't get that choice with a sperm bank anywhere else. And it's only Colorado that has that. And I think it's so great because with traditional sperm banks, you may want to help, you may have this passion, but you have no say in where your gametes go at all. So I think what Colorado has done is amazing in that aspect and in the donor conceived person's rights as well.
Yes. It's so true. My daughter is donor conceived, and I think about finding her donor. If I have to wait until she's 18, are they sick now? How many kids do they have? At the time when I got the vials of her donor father, I bought the rest out just because I didn't want that door even opening, right? And at the time, I want to say they were $800 per vial. So
Mhm.
whatever I didn't use, I destroyed. And maybe that wasn't like, that was sort of my version of trying to address this issue. There is Donor Conceived Council now. There's a nonprofit organization that really is doing these steps to really, on Darlene's page, of really trying to think ahead of what the donor person really does need down the line from their donating gamete donor.
Yeah, it's so important. And Darlene has been actively involved. There's two of them, actually, two major ones, the Donor Conceived Council. Darlene has had extensive conversations with all of these organizations because there's feeling and thought about sperm banks, and that's not what Coast to Coast is. And we want to get feedback from donor conceived people. We want to know what's important to you because you are the innocent here. You're the person who had no say in any of this, and you deserve everything that you can get. What we do at A Perfect Match and Coast to Coast is, so your daughter, if she had questions, you could just reach out to us and either ask us those questions, and we could ask the donor to write a response. We could see if the donor is willing to speak to you, to speak to her, to get those responses, or even meet in person. So even if the contract says that it is a completely anonymous donation and the parties are never to reach out to each other, people change their minds. So we're always happy to just see if it's an option with the donor. We have had a lot of donors, mostly egg donor, right? Because that's been going on since 1998. But many of our egg donors have met with their donor conceived person from their donation. And we did recently have one person who said no, but it wasn't a no forever. It was I have really young kids, and I don't feel like I can meet your child without first explaining to my children what I did, why I did it, all of that. So it's a no
Oh,
for right now, but a
right.
yes in the future. And she did write a lovely letter to the child or children. So they're still open.
That's a completely great answer, though. I mean, it's an honest answer, transparent
Mhm.
answer. And it
Right.
really just does go back to that child, those children receiving that letter really does down the line help them understand the different stages that this really does require personal evolving. I could see how it would be a little different for my partner to meet the biological father of my daughter, right? Right now, he's acting like her dad. She believes he's his dad. She's 5, right? And so I could see how he needs a little bit more of time to prepare himself to meet that person or even to receive a letter from that person, right? Whereas for me, it's different. So
Right.
it's really about being sensitive to all of the parties at
Mhm.
hand at different stages, right?
Well, and seeking counseling too. So, your partner, for example, could absolutely use some counseling in this situation to help work through those issues that he or she may be having. But the mental health aspect is so key, especially with the known or meeting or even receiving a future letter. And then we also, as an agency, require that our donors update us with any kind of medical or life update. And then again, going back to Colorado, they're really leading the charge here with legislation. We are required to get regular updates from the donors as well and make multiple attempts through multiple methods of contact to really keep that donor conceived person as well informed about their family health history as possible, because the donor could be sick, the donor could have died from cancer, or there could be any number of things. They could have some new long-term condition that is potentially genetic, whereas seeking those regular updates makes sure that we get as much information as we can for the donor conceived person and their parent. So here's a fun story, not fun, but one of our donor conceived people from an egg donor came down with a condition where they required a blood marrow transplant. And what we did is we reached out to the donor to see if she was willing to do the testing and willing to be a potential match for this person who needed the transplant. And she agreed. She was unfortunately not a match, but this is a lifelong thing. You're helping create this person, and there is a responsibility to still be willing to help them after they're created as well with any issues that they may have. And it could go the other way as well. It could be that the donor needed a marrow transplant and the child is old enough to donate. Maybe, they're 18, 21, whatever. And that child might be willing to help them out as well.
That's right. Gosh, that's so beautiful. You talked about how the donors are up to a week at a time per family, that sometimes it's 2 to 3 weeks total if you end up banking the vials yourselves.
Yeah, so we allow our donors to either go the banking route or the directed route, or a combination of the two, depending on what suits their availability needs and their desires. So we have donors who are not available except for maybe a couple weeks out of the year because of their job or travel. So that was the main reason why we started banking, actually, is we had these amazing donors, but they were never available when parents wanted them anyways. So with directed donations, so that's a donation for a specific family and for that family only. The donor will travel for up to a week, if they need to travel, to the parent's chosen clinic or collection facility for those donations. And anything that is received or created during that week of visits is the property of the intended parents. So generally, we see about 3 to 4 vials per donation. So if you're looking at a week of donations, that's, potentially 12 vials or more, because you can get an extra day in there. So it could be, 16 vials. And if you're somebody who's going to be doing an IUI cycle, it's so important to get more vials than just, if you're doing IVF, you really only need one, because they don't even need to use the whole vial for each retrieval that you complete. So the directed donation is a great option for same-sex female couples or women who are doing IUI. And then for the banking, we usually have them come out. So we're looking at 6 family units for the most part. And if we're assuming that it's an IVF cycle for most of these, which it is, we don't need a million vials from this donor. So we're looking at, 2 weeks maybe of donations, and then they're good. We can sell to those 6 families. They don't have to spend any more of their time traveling. And then they still have the opportunity to meet the donor. We have still set up video calls or in-person meetings with donors from our banking donations. So you still get the same experience, but the donor in a way gets a much better experience. There's, instead of 6 weeks of travel, you're looking at 2. We've also seen sperm donors who have created so many vials. I can't remember our record, but it was definitely over 15 vials in a single donation. So he would have only had to really donate for 2 days, really, to get us to that 6 family units. So it depends. It really depends on the donor and what's going on with their medical results at the time.
Hearing the way your agency works, wow, this is really la creme de la creme. Like, you guys really take the time to dot your I's, cross your T's. And I like exactly that the donors are really handled in such a human way. Have you heard of some of these perhaps crazy stories of do it at home instead of like coming to the professionals?
Yeah, not not us individuals. I've read some, and we did actually have one of the sperm kings did apply for our agency. We didn't really notice, and the way that he answered his questions seemed perfectly normal, and so we realized that we needed to make some changes to some of our questions if he was able to get through. But these people who are doing donations at home are really setting themselves up for a lot of risk, both medically, so STDs, there's no genetic testing done, RH negative women could have an issue. There's all kinds of medical reasons not to do it this way. The parents are setting themselves up to now have to co-parent because there's no legal contract that says that this is a donor. There's no medical facility involved. How are you supposed to know that this wasn't just a boyfriend at the time and you didn't put them on the birth certificate out of your own choosing? So the parental rights aspect is really concerning to me for the intended parents, but also the sperm donors. So the sperm donors could now be held responsible as a parent, and the intended mother could force the sperm donor to pay child support because
Yeah.
there's no legal contract. There was no medical professional involved. There's nobody to say that this child wasn't conceived, quote, the old fashioned way, right? And I get it. It's a cheap option. Maybe it's a friend that you know, even. And so it's like, let's just have a baby. But you don't know what the future is going to bring. You don't know how that relationship is going to come out in a couple of years. You could have a falling out, or somebody could come under financial stress or decide that they do want to be a parent when they didn't before. So, yeah, there's just so much risk
So much
involved.
risk. Yeah, like it's just open-ended, endless risk of not doing it the right way in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I also like how you said you guys treat it as an intentional donation, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to just a banked donation. And I feel like this is becoming sort of the next wave of ART, right? Maybe it's always been there, but I feel like the focus there hasn't really been highlighted the way I'm hearing you talk about it, almost as much as the way people still don't understand the difference between like a traditional carrier versus a gestational carrier. I mean, there are two different ways to help a family grow, and people still don't really understand the difference of the two, right? And there's definitely things in the media that you see, that we hear, that really play into that misunderstanding of what these, I call them angels, are really trying to help do here.
Yeah, I mean, so many people confuse traditional surrogacy and gestational surrogacy. The biggest difference is genetics, right? So the traditional surrogate is the genetic parent. They are also the gamete donor for that child. With a gestational surrogate, there is no genetic relationship with the child whatsoever. And the difference too, with a gestational surrogate, it's always IVF. So those embryos are created in a lab, they are potentially tested, and then they are transferred into the surrogate. With a traditional surrogate, it could be an IUI. So they could just be, putting the sperm in when the traditional surrogate is ovulating, or it could be that the embryos were still created via IVF in the lab. But those are the biggest differences between the two of these, and biggest being genetics. Who is the
Yeah.
gamete donor, but also who is the intended parent? And that does apply to both. So, who is the intended parent for this child? Who is going to raise this child? And that can also determine the parentage. That's how we determine it in California and Nevada, etc. There are some places, some uses for traditional surrogacy that are very much needed. We had a gestational surrogate at A Perfect Match who started as a traditional surrogate. So, I'm not saying that traditional surrogacy is bad by any means. It has its place, it has its uses, but a lot of the rhetoric around surrogacy, I think, focuses or has a misunderstanding of what a gestational surrogate is and where they're coming from in this.
Yes, absolutely. Traditional surrogacy has a role in and of itself. And that's right. None of them, one is not more old fashioned than the other, one is not better than the other. It really just depends on the individual and the family. And what a blessing that in America we have both options, because in some countries
Mm-hmm.
you just don't. But one thing with that I don't care for with the misrepresentation of gestational carriers is that this is just a contract. They don't know what they're getting into, that nobody explained the contract to them, that ripping, I say were because I was an intended
Mm-hmm.
parent, that I ripped
Mm-hmm.
my child away from my surrogate mother. It's just sort of this lack of saying that, why wouldn't we treat this ethically? Why wouldn't we
Mm-hmm.
do it with a contract? Like, this isn't just something we thought about overnight.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's so many steps in this process to make sure that the surrogate is in the right place and that the intended parents are in the right place before beginning the process. So we as an agency, we interview the surrogate, we talk through everything with her, we make sure that she is done having children of her own, because there are medical risks to this as well. And then there's the psychological evaluation. So the surrogate is thoroughly tested. Her partner participates in a counseling session with the psychologist to make sure that everybody at least has considered all of the aspects to this, and again, it fully understands what they're committing to. There is legal representation. There is separate legal representation in these contracts. So nobody is coercing the surrogate. We personally at our agency don't allow the intended parent and the surrogate to communicate directly until that contract is signed, because you don't know what's happening behind the scenes, right? They could be texting each other. The surrogate could be bullying the intended parent into signing something that they're not comfortable with, or vice versa. So we really want to make sure that there is no coercion of any kind. It's not to like, oh, we don't want you guys talking beforehand. There's a reason. There's a reason for it. It's for everybody's safety. I always I'm a child conceived from a gestational carrier, so I have my own personal story of how I feel about it. Other people may feel differently, right? So I absolutely do not feel like I was taken away from my gestational carrier. And my mother likes to tell this story about after I was born, my mom went to visit her because it's her sister-in-law, right? So she walked in the room and Judy is just crying, sobbing, crying. And my mom is like, oh no, like I took Katie away from her and she's so upset about that. Well, no, it was that the nurse had drawn blood and was really aggressive with drawing the blood, and she was in pain. So she was like, no, absolutely take her. Let me recover. Let me get over this physically. I am fine emotionally. I was just, that nurse was really rough. And what a lot of our surrogates say too is the biggest emotional part of this is that they formed this close relationship with the parents, and they may never see them again. So there have been some cases where maybe they were texting once a week or even daily, and then the parents were just so focused on their newborn that they didn't have time to communicate anymore. It might not have been intentional. Those newborn days are rough. They're really rough. So our surrogates say that losing that relationship with the parents is really the hardest part of it, not the baby. They don't care. They're done having kids. Maybe they just really enjoy being pregnant, but they absolutely do not want another newborn, right? So yeah, I mean, that is, I think the surrogates may not be fully prepared for losing that relationship. And that's why we provide support after the delivery as well for a period of time, because there's a lot of hormones going on. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of aspects to this, and they still need support.
So true. I wanted to ask you if, I mean, your mother or your father, these pioneers, I can't imagine the questions and comments that they received when they were pushing forward with their journey. Did they ever share anything with you, or did you ever overhear anything?
So they were very big into their church when I was little, and they started this business. Their pastor at a service one day, but it was definitely anti-gay, was what it was his topic of the sermon that day. And my parents, being very transparent people, felt that they needed to tell the pastor about what they do for work and why they disagree with what he was saying. But mostly, we're part of your congregation and we do not agree with this at all. We help gay people all the time. And they got kicked out. They were asked not to return to church again.
Out?
Yeah. So that's the biggest one that I've heard from them. There have also been, for the most part, my dad's family. So it was my dad's sister who was my surrogate. They were incredibly supportive, all of them. However, I do have one family member who thought it was very wrong what they were doing, did not support it at all, and made it very clear that all of ART basically is not something that she agrees, something that God would approve of.
I see. My goodness. It's just such a big bomb. I mean, it's so disheartening, right? Like your congregation, your faith, your family, like this is your safe space. This is your belief. And to feel like that door is shut, you cannot be yourself. You cannot talk to them. That's hard.
Yeah, it is hard, but luckily they were surrounded by support in other ways. When my parents first started talking about doing this was after the Baby M case. When it came time for them to actually create the embryos and look into a gestational carrier, they had so many women volunteering to help carry.
Wow.
I think they had something like 10 to 15 people offer, and they screened a lot of them. And my parents did end up using all of their embryos, and I'm the only the only one that took, and it was the first transfer. It was just meant to be.
I've been hearing about people affected by the words of their religion, and how that makes them feel. Somebody said, I need to search and find more supportive, open-minded pastors and priests and just people talking about faith to those of us affected by infertility and making us feel inclusive of our communities and not that we're on the outskirts or that we can't be part of the community or that we're bad for being lesbian, gay, bisexual, whatever it is, right? We're there, whatever, regardless of your faith, we're being positive.
We are not the ones that should be judging here. Let's just support everybody in their journey and their life and focus on yourself.
Amen. Focus on yourself is right. Kaitlin, you have such a fun job. It feels like it was your calling to go on to this next step with this family business.
It did not start off that way. So I originally went to UCLA and my major was molecular, cellular, and developmental biology. I intended to become an embryologist. So I did still want to work in the field, not directly as an agency or a lawyer like my parents were. I quickly found out that maybe I wasn't really cut out for science majors, specifically at UCLA. I got in on the honors program. I'd taken AP classes, so it isn't like I wasn't smart. It was such a big difference from high school to go into like future med students, right? Everything was bell curve and I just wasn't ready. Maybe if I'd waited another year, it would have been a different outcome. So I kind of floundered and I found the geography major actually is where I ended up settling. I just really enjoyed learning about how people kind of got to where they were in different cultures. I ended up getting a graduate certificate as well from USC in geographical information systems.
Wow.
And I ended up working for one of my professors and moved out to Texas in Austin to work for him. And he was Egyptian, so his main focus was on projects in the Middle East. And so I got to travel with him to Qatar, to the United Arab Emirates on these projects, which was so incredibly fun. But then around, I think it was the end of 2014, my brother's health declined. And so I decided to move back to California to kind of help my family through that, and worked for my parents kind of part-time during that time, and then switched to full-time. It was just starting to get really interesting. I started being able to work with intended parents that were looking for egg donors and really found a passion with matching. It was incredible to see these people come in with some kind of expectation of what they wanted.
Okay.
And then see where they ended up as well. So the way that I approached matching was, tell me what's most important to you. Is it physical? Is it their education? Is it their personality? Like, what is the absolute most important piece to you? And then kind of go around that. And it's really interesting to work with all these different people and find that perfect match for them.
Right. It's very cool, Kaitlin, how you're matching surrogates to intended parents, you're matching egg donors, and potentially you're matching sperm donors. So it's 3 different sets of skills.
Yes, I do have help. And I've never done all 3 at once. That would be way too much. Even for a while, I was doing egg donor and sperm donor, and that was a lot. It's a really interesting field. There's a lot of very interesting people, and certainly matching surrogate client with a surrogate is extremely different than an egg donor client with an egg donor. That surrogate relationship is important because it's a year long, and hopefully longer if everybody gets along, but the genetics are a lifetime, right? So finding that donor who fits their family and their needs is such a unique experience, and so important that they get what they want.
Unique is the right word. I understand the cultural differences, the religious differences, right? How do you explain this to your parents? How do you explain it to your partner? I've had some donors who their partners, their boyfriends or girlfriends, like they don't want to talk to them anymore because they were donors. And I honestly feel like maybe we need to do a better job of educating not just the donors, but having like that education for the parents, or like education that the donors can talk about, understand what they're doing, have time to process that and make that decision for themselves at an early age, right? I do think that if we're able to find the right way of explaining it, right? A right way of understanding it. A lot of people still don't really understand it. If we take the taboos out, right? What does this mean? You're not giving away your baby,
Mhm. Yeah. And we are a little different in how we talk to our donors as well, mostly because of our sperm bank, but also from the very beginning, we've always wanted our donors to include their family. So when my mom was first starting A Perfect Match, she ran her first ad in 1998. She talked to the moms of these women and wanted the moms or the dads to be the one who traveled with the donor for the retrieval stay. Because this is a family decision. And she really was amazing and foresaw that genetic testing was going to change and that you would be able to find people through genetics, like the 23andMe and the Ancestry and all of that. So she's always told our donors, you will be found. There is not a doubt in my mind that you will remain anonymous. Let's nip that thought in the bud right now and think about how you're going to react when a child does reach out. And how do you want that reaching out to happen? Let's put that in the contract. You want it to go through the agency? Are you okay being contacted directly? Are you willing to talk to them? But think about the child as well, because this child is going to have questions that only you can answer. Also, updates, family history updates were incredibly important to my mom from the beginning. Just because the donor is healthy and her family is healthy right now doesn't mean in 6 months even that something might change.
That's right.
So that communication and transparency has always been part of our agency. For the surrogates, we provide a monthly support group with a therapist on that call.
I didn't take advantage of that enough in my journey as an intended parent. I was focused on my surrogate having her mental health. I was really concerned about, okay, does she have this? Does she have that? And, is she getting what she needs? And I confused my mental health with a mental health therapist versus a mental health therapist that is trained in assisted reproductive technology, which is very different. And I confused what the word therapy meant, right? I honestly felt that if I took the mental health from the agency, they would see it as a weakness, that I wasn't ready to go on this intended parent journey, and instead of like, this can only help me stand stronger going down this super, super strenuous path.
Yeah, I think it's so important for the intended parents to seek help as well. On the surrogate side, we require that the intended parent has something like a psychosocial educational session. So it's not that you're being evaluated in your fitness to be a parent. It's let's talk through everything that's going to come up through this pregnancy and what you can do and how you can react in a way that is healthy. And there's also joint psychological sessions with the intended parent and the surrogate. On the sperm donor side, if it's a known donation, we require a joint psychological session. That is also required by most clinics for a known donor, but we're making it a requirement for all of our matches in which there's going to be any type of known or future communication, because it is so important to be on the same page. And we've seen it so many times where the intended parent says something and then they go into the session and they're like, oh, wait, no, this is how I see the communication happening. And it's better to figure that out now and have the donor say, yes, I'm comfortable with that, or no, I'm not, than to get to a pregnancy or a child and have somebody be uncomfortable. So we're considering making that a requirement for our egg donation cases as well, because it's been so helpful with these donations moving forward. It just sets the right tone
Right.
at the beginning. And then there's going to be stuff that comes up. There's going to be feelings that happen, and that's okay. The agency wants you supported, because we're going to get those calls one way or another of you having an issue with something. Let's also get you support from somebody who's trained in this. We're not trained in that. We'll do what we can to help everybody and calm the situation down. Like with a loss, for example, parents need mental health support during that, as does the surrogate. The agency doesn't see seeking mental health support as a problem. We see it as you being self-aware and taking steps to make sure that you are healthy and taken care of and in the right space moving forward.
100%. It's worth the investment, and quite a small investment in terms of your big ticket item of surrogacy. If you look at the percentage that goes into that, like, yes, I want that for me.
Yeah, and it is a very different kind of support than maybe you have a psychologist or a therapist that you see regularly in your life. Third party reproduction is a very different animal.
That's right.
And they may have no training in that and may not understand even some of the terms that you're using. So
That's
finding
right.
somebody who has the appropriate training and has been working in the industry for a good amount of time is so important.
What do you think has been the biggest challenge for you so far as in a perfect match?
There's a couple things. So, regarding surrogacy, the biggest issue we're having is insurance. Insurance providers are not necessarily not willing to cover surrogates, but they treat them differently. So, there are insurance companies who will require a lien, which is based off of the surrogate's compensation. It could be 100% lien, it could be a 30% lien, but parents are having to set this money aside for costs related to the surrogate's pregnancy. That doesn't feel fair. She's pregnant, just like every other pregnant woman, and she deserves fully paid and covered care. So there's the Insurance Access and Equity Alliance. Our case manager, Susan Merritt, she's on the board there. She's a surrogate who had a lien, I believe it was 100% lien placed on her for the surrogacy. And yeah, it just doesn't seem fair. And there's fewer and fewer insurance companies, insurance providers who will even cover surrogacy related medical costs. A lot of them have exclusions for surrogates.
It feels like a slippery slope, like it's almost like they're profiling who the intended parents are and who the surrogate. It doesn't seem fair. It's like this whammy that comes out and gets you just for them to get the money, not based on like a normal pregnancy. That's so unfair.
Yeah. Another thing more on the egg donor side is there are a lot of PE groups that are entering the ART space, and
Okay.
it's pushing out a lot of egg donor agencies. There have been so many that have closed in the last 5 years. There are clinics who have their own in-house agencies, and they're really pushing those donors. Like it could be that they say, if you want a guarantee program with our clinic, you have to choose one of our egg donors. We will not accept a guarantee program with an outside egg donor. Not all clinics do this, of course, but it's definitely causing an issue with standalone agencies, at which then lessens the amount of donors that are available for parents to choose from as well.
Kaitlin, you're a pioneer. Yes, your parents are pioneers, but what you're doing is just next generation. That's incredible. You are uncovering so much that still needs to be fine tuned. It's just the next wave of what needs to happen in ART.
There's still so many smoke and mirrors aspects to ART, and there really does not need to be. There should not be a taboo around any aspect of this. Nobody should be afraid to share their story or the fact that they needed a gamete donor or a surrogate. So it's great to be a part of creating a shift in the different industries. You know, my parents started it and I'm continuing it with this sperm bank and some little aspects still with surrogacy and egg donation. But it's an absolute pleasure to be part of this industry and help so many families.
That is all the time we have for today. Liking the episode on whichever platform you're on really goes a long way to getting us heard. You can check out more of these and similar stories on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, and TikTok at mothersinarms.pod. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.